So as Georgina said, this has been billed as a fireside chat. We're going to reimagine this as a poolside chat.
Oh, yeah.
So the pina coladas are on their way. So, well, Simon, thank you for joining us today. I think this is a highly pertinent topic. It's a theme that has come up regularly over the last day. As a regulator, when you have to think about your role and balancing investor protection, but at the same time the need to support investment, market activity, economic growth, how do you approach that balancing act?
Yeah, thank you. No pressure. We're just following a Nobel laureate who was talking about economic growth, so I'll answer with due humility. I think in general, you talk about balancing investor protection and economic growth. In the medium term, we think the two reconcile, which is just as well, because we only have 4 strategic priorities as the FCA for the next 5 years, and 2 of them are engaged by this, supporting UK economic growth and helping consumers navigate their financial lives. So we think that the 2 actually go together. They don't need to be traded off. But we think slightly different in wholesale markets to retail markets. So just to nail down on the wholesale side, there's no such thing as a wholesale consumer duty. Those markets are characterized by sophisticated counterparties, contracts. If something goes wrong, it's the rule of law, which we have great strength here in the UK. Of course, we can come and hold people accountable and punish them. But that's how wholesale markets operate, and we're really comfortable with that. You'll see this big reform agenda that we have, which is generally stripping away prescriptive rules as we go and replacing it with transparency to allow wholesale participants to judge one another and address any conflicts of interest. On the retail side, it's not so different. So we have a problem in the UK in particular with trust in financial services. So investor protection is a really necessary foundation. People need to have the confidence to invest their money. Sadly, it's only 39% of people in our survey have trust in UK financial services. We need to get that up, and we will do. But once you have that, of course leads to confidence, it leads to investment, it reduces costs all around, costs of due diligence. But critically, people need to be protected from scams and really abjectly poor product design or mis-selling, conflicts of interest. What they don't need to be protected from is investment risk. And I think that's where some of the conversation in the UK and other places has been wrong in the past. There's been a sense that consumer protection meant nothing bad can ever happen. That's why we've been really thoughtful in reframing our priority. So consumer protection is still a thing, we talk about that, but we generally now talk about helping consumers navigate their financial lives. Real people need to do something with their life. They want to achieve particular goals that need money. They need to make sure they have enough to save in later life. And so we're just as worried about people not taking enough investment risk as taking too much. Of course, there's a balance, but there's a big agenda now trying to encourage retail to take those steps. You talked about it a bit yesterday. What's great is there's pretty strong consensus on this. Maybe a few years ago, this might have sounded a bit controversial for a regulator to be talking about more risk, but we really have support from the government. We have a really good partnership with the industry across the whole of UK financial services, and we are fully behind it. It's the thing that excites many people the most, is getting more retail money comfortable in UK capital markets. And the scale of the opportunity, but the scale of the problem is so large, means the scale of the opportunity is so large. So there's 7 million people in the UK that have over £10,000 in cash, so a proxy for having disposable income to invest, but no investments. Add that up, that's 430 billion on the sidelines. And if you take the people who've got over 10 grand and generally don't have many investments, there's another 300 or so billion that people estimate. So there's a big prize for the consumers first and foremost, but for the industry as well, and for growth and all the things that the professor was talking about. So we're really on it. To answer the question, they don't really trade off. We believe in both of the things. And there's a big program of agenda. I'll be brief, but last month in April, we had 4 big things that came out. We had this, these have all got acronyms, I'm afraid. We had the Advice Guidance Boundary Review. So we in the FCA, we designed this very high quality advice system, but only 9% of people get financial advice in the UK. So we've had to step back and say, this isn't working. This is not working as well as it could do. What about steps between full fat advice and ways of supporting? So from April, if they're authorised, banks and other participants will be able to say, hello customer, I can see you've got over 10,000 in cash. People like you invest in these ways. Or I can see you have these products, people like you do this. So it's not targeted, it's not Andy specific, but we expect it to be a lot better than what happens at the moment. 30 firms have applied for authorization, there are already 6 that have got it. We've changed the way that people describe their financial products. So many of you will have engaged with kids' documents when you try and buy a fund. No one reads them, I don't read them. We've taken it away, we've said to people, to financial services firms, we trust you, you're the best place to describe your products. Do it how you like, start competing on engagement, start describing your products in a way that people are interested in. Just keep these 3 things comparable. We've made it clear on risk warnings. People think the FCA say your capital is at risk on all those adverts that you see on the tube and elsewhere. That's not true. But instead of just sitting there saying it's not true, we've worked with the IA to make it really clear. And that's given the IA and others, the Investment Association, confidence to have their savvy squirrel advert that I was talking to people outside and try and get that culture of investing going in the UK.
That's an interesting stat that you mentioned. 30% of people in the UK have no confidence in financial services and just leave their money on deposit earning nothing.
Yeah, it's damning, but I'm pretty optimistic. I mean, a few years ago, without this consensus, we might have felt doom and gloom. But so many people have their shoulder to this, including the government to their credit. What we don't see is the financial education. I know you've been discussing that. That is a common refrain. But I think there's a space for industry to step into. And actually, that's one of the things I want to do. I want to give people confidence to step into that space and not feel that the regulatory eye is so heavy that you can't talk to customers in a human way and try and engage them, meet them where they are. Because while I gave those statistics, and they're true, 7 million people in the country have crypto investments. So this appetite towards risk is really incoherent. And I think that demonstrates that UK consumers are just at sea and need support. One thing I really should mention on this stage is what we've done in bond markets when it comes to retail investments. So again, a terrible acronym, our POATRA reforms, recognised that we had these well-intended restrictions on denominations below 100,000. We said that they should have additional disclosures for retail, but they weren't working. We looked at the facts. Retail weren't reading them anyway, so they were pointless, and it was causing a barrier for really good blue chip companies, good credit risks, saying, well, why don't we just do over 100,000 and skip this barrier? So we looked at this, it didn't work, we've stripped it away, we've made other changes. From January this year, you can issue bonds and sell bonds to retail from as little as £1. LSE have got their Access Bonds platform up and running. They've taken the lead by reducing the denomination of their own debt down to £1,000. But I still hear that people are nervous. And so I just want to say, we really want to see denominations come down. We really want to see retail engagement in bonds. You can come and talk to us if there's some worry that you have that the regulator will come and hit you with a stick, because it'll be one of the measures of success. I really want to see retail feeling comfortable investing in the great companies we have.
That's interesting, what you say about bonds, because one of the issues we find, particularly when we step outside of our bubble, is when you talk about investment, whether it's in Europe, UK, wherever, people think of equity. They think that's the product that drives growth. How do you see the role of bond markets in driving economic growth and development?
Yeah, I mean, do people think about equity markets? That's what the press talk about. And it's an issue for us. Even in the equity markets, they don't talk about equity markets. They talk about the FTSE 100, or they talk about the indices. So even there, like the public narrative and the newspaper narrative is pretty narrow. But I think, to be absolutely clear, our focus when we talk about supporting UK economic growth, that is the whole industry. And the UK, with a second financial centre in the world, we want to be number one. We were before, we want to be number one. One of our great strengths is asset management, banking, insurance, the whole gamut, and on asset classes. We're number two, but we're number one in some really important places. Almost triple in terms of other competitors in FX, really good in OTC derivatives, and then parts of the fixed income market are jewels in the crown when it comes to international issuance. So, to say nice things to the audience, the bond market is completely critical in funding governments, our government and other governments, completely critical in funding companies, clearly, and also for consumers in terms of both their savings products, that later life challenge, but also a role in the mortgage market. So our job is to make markets work well, and that's about as fundamental to that as it is. Then you have the contribution to the UK economy of the industry, which is very significant as well. And hopefully you can see that in our actions. So we're on this big reform agenda, as I mentioned. We've started with fixed income markets in a number of areas. So on bond market transparency, that was one of the first things as we're onshoring these files from the EU. We generally take this, I think our instinct is take something prescriptive, retain the spirit of it, but strip away, leave it an outcome, something that we can measure. And so we did that on bond market transparency. We had this very complex, onerous for both you and us, and didn't lead to great outcomes in terms of real-time transparency. We've changed that, a lot of engagement, and real-time transparency has shot up. When it comes to the consolidated tapes, we will have 2 consolidated tapes in the UK in time. We'll have a period when we have 3, but we started with bond markets. And I don't know whether you've discussed this already, but our consolidated tape provider is now authorized. That happened in the last week. They're working really closely with the industry. There's a bit of work to do over the next couple of weeks to make sure that we get the data that we need. But it's looking good, and it's looking on time, and that will be way ahead of the equity tape. So it's not true. The public narrative is often FTSE 100, but in terms of the FCA and our focus on growth, fixed income is absolutely there.
It's interesting what you say about the consolidated tape, and that's been a big theme over the last day, as you can imagine, and for ICMA, a big theme for many years. And one of the things that comes up when we talk about the consolidated tape in Europe, the consolidated tape in the UK, is the fact that with the UK, I mean, you mentioned transparency for bond markets has gone through the roof, and it has. It's gone from like less than 10% real time to 80 to 90% for fixed income, which is pretty impressive. But also the fact that there's this inbuilt flexibility. In 6 months there will be a review, and it could be simplified because it is pretty complex. But that sort of leans into the concept of smarter, more agile regulation. Could you talk a little bit more about this and tell us how the FCA thinks about this?
Yeah, thanks, Andy. You're setting me up because we've got 4 priorities. I mentioned 2 of them. The 4th is be a smarter regulator. So for completeness, the other one is fight financial crime. So be a smarter regulator. It sounds like a buzzword, and I have to say other regulators are copying us. And maybe it's a buzzword that people like because it's not deregulation, it's smarter regulation. Who can object? But for us, you can see it in the action. So it's making sure that we achieve our goals in the best way, the lowest cost for you and for us, the least frictionful way. So you can see that in some of those policy things that I mentioned. I mean, the review, transparency, we had a lot of conversations and we're committed to getting it right. And because our policy-making process is quite lean now, we've merged supervision and policy. We have people that go and talk to firms, people that write the rules are in the same teams. So if it's not working, we can change it. We just changed on the equity side. We just changed the IPO process based on feedback, and we did it in a really quick way. So that's one thing, just being quick, hearing, being humble when we see things aren't working. I mentioned the product summaries on funds earlier. We tested them. So we tried different ways of, does this cut through to a consumer? The current KID documents, like zero cut through. And then we tried different ones. We had an idea. We thought consumers need to know X. We tested it. Actually, they prefer Y. Okay, fine. That's how the real world works. And we did that. So you can see that in our policy making. Hopefully our communication, we now have 8 or 9 regulatory priority documents. You can find them. They summarize everything we think about a market and everything we intend to do on the policy side and the supervision side in the next year. And crucially, they have our faces on it. They have my face on many of them and my colleagues' faces to really show you can get in touch with us. If there's an idea that's not working in fixed income, you've heard the way, hopefully, that we're thinking about the world, come and tell us, because we really do have the ability to change it. And in wholesale markets in particular, if it's not working for the market, then that is the point. The point is the market. So if there's feedback, you can come and give it to us. There are other things. So many of you, if you had experience of our authorizations process 4 or 5 years ago, it was slow. We had a backlog of approved persons, senior manager regimes. It now takes 18 days to get is the median for a senior manager. I do have the stats here, but it's something like 120 days for a new authorized firm from scratch. And we publish those statistics on the website, the median and the bounds. So if you're thinking about doing something, setting up a firm or changing your permission, you don't have to sit in that stasis. You look on our website, you can see how long you'll expect it to take. So that's smart regulation, because there's no cost to us publishing that, unless there's a bit of scrutiny, but no cost. But hopefully it really helps the industry. There's other stuff, there's sandboxes, there's all the work on tokenization. Haven't scratched the surface, but that's the way that we see being a smarter regulator.
There's a lot more that I'd love to dig into, but we're coming up against the clock. I'm just going to throw one final question at you, which I think is pertinent to everybody in this room. As an industry body, as an industry, what can we do to help you as a policymaker to set regulation that achieves, I think, what we're all trying to achieve?
Do you know, I think we're in a good space. I feel the energy between the regulator and the industry, and I include the government again, is very positive. There's a bit of this is about positivity, about remembering the great strengths of London and talking about it. That's your job rather than, well, it's all of our jobs, but that is part of it. Some of the reforms that we do, and all the good reforms, are a bit contentious. So we have a policy-making process. We get views from all sides. I think what's really important is that when we make a decision, we're not compromising. We're not trying to satisfy both sides if that breaks the product in some way. Sometimes we have to choose this one or that one. But then to get behind it and not to dwell on that particular decision and get behind it because the momentum and the whole is working. And the other thing I would say is let's address that retail challenge. We have to meet retail where they are, so we can't wish they were more sophisticated than they are. So that means the way that we sell to them, we describe products, the way we treat them when things go wrong, all needs to be appropriate. But let's tackle it because it makes a difference to the country. It's really important.
Thank you, Simon. I really appreciate your time this morning. Please join me in thanking Simon Walsh.